you guys are here, ready to go?
Yeah.
All right. Hello and welcome to the 14th Annual Advanced Practice Nursing Conference, hosted by the Graduate Nurses Students Association from the University of Manitoba's College of Nursing. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Karen Livingston, one of the co-chairs along with Eunice. I saw her there. So right now we're going to do the land acknowledgement. That's Eunice.
Hello, Eunice here. Hello, everyone, and good to see you all. I'm so excited. Look at the number of people here and online. I'm from Yorkton, Saskatchewan. I'm a Black woman from Yorkton, Saskatchewan. So I feel very honored to be doing my land acknowledgement. I'm a second-year PhD student, and in our seminar classes with Dr. Annette Schultz, she challenged us to write our own land acknowledgement. So I wrote mine, and I'll be sharing it with you. So Africa, my motherland, like many other places in the world, was colonized. And although the impact of colonization lingers in my country till this day, I'm astonished at how bad the impact of colonization is on Canada. Whilst discussing colonization with a Métis colleague at work, she commented, "The white man still lives in Canada." I went home that day thinking of what she said and wondered if she meant the white man left my home after we gained independence, or whether she meant the white man should go back home. This left me wondering where the white man and the likes of me will go if the Indigenous people gain enough power and decide to reclaim their land. On that note, as a dedicated healthcare professional, privileged to live and work on the land that does not belong to my forefathers, I hold a unique responsibility not only to care for the patient's physical well-being, but also to uphold values of justice, empathy, and inclusivity. Reflecting on the Truth and Reconciliation celebration, I spent some time thinking about the transformative processes of acknowledging historical injustices, fostering healing, and promoting unity within my community. As a healthcare provider, I apologize for the cultural genocides committed against Indigenous people and acknowledge that the healthcare system and nursing education programs are embedded with colonial hierarchical power structures, ontologies, and epistemologies. Therefore, I must commit to learning my truth and the Canadian history to develop authentic, meaningful, and respectful relationship with all Indigenous people. I believe reconciliation requires this colonial history. I believe reconciliation requires history, and for all healthcare providers to respond to the Truth and Reconciliation call like we're doing here today. As a registered nurse, I'm committed to including Indigenous perspective and ensuring that their knowledge system are honored, respected, valued, and integrated into my everyday practice. As a registered nurse on Treaty 1, homeland of the Métis Nation, I acknowledge that I have a history of causing harm towards Indigenous people. Therefore, I'm committed to educating and supporting student nurses on how to identify and address racism that is perpetuated in our healthcare setting. Therefore, I encourage each one of us to be constantly reminded of the horrific impact of colonization and to integrate truth and reconciliation practices in our everyday lives. I urge you to take a moment to think of how you can contribute to this important movement within your workplace and your community. Finally, let's embrace truth and reconciliation, not just as a professional obligation, but a moral imperative. By working together to rectify past wrongs, we can shape a healthcare system that embodies justice, compassion, and equity for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Eunice. Very good. So as you know, the topic of this year's conference is intersectoral collaboration. We have 3 fantastic speakers lined up who will speak on this topic as it applies to their practice and experience as advanced practice nurses. Our speakers tonight in order of presentation are Lisa Merrill, Cindy Fehr, and Stephanie Von Hout. Following each speaker, we'll have a 5-minute Q&A. Please feel free to write your questions in the chat box if you're joining the conference online, as this will be monitored as well. This year's conference is also collaborating with the Manitoba Harm Reduction Network and the Graduate Nurses Student Association will also be donating on behalf of the graduate students. Final note of the evening is about our door prizes. There will be 2 gift basket draws, a wellness and an entertainment basket, which you can see there. They will be for the attendees in person, and gift cards will be drawn for online attendees, and those will be drawn tomorrow, and everyone will be notified by email. Online attendees winner, like I said, will be notified by email by the email they used to register. So right now I'd like to introduce and welcome Dr. Neetha Dick. She's the Dean of the University of Manitoba's College of Nursing, and she will bring her remarks.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Eunice, for your beautiful land acknowledgement. Good evening, everyone. As Dean of the College of Nursing at the University of Manitoba, I'm just delighted to welcome each of you to the 14th Annual Advanced Practice Nursing Conference. Thank you so much for coming, and we look forward to your engagement and participation. I would like to congratulate the Graduate Nursing Students Association for organizing and hosting this special conference, and thank the Planning Committee for their excellent work. And a special thank you to Karen and Eunice as co-chairs of the Planning Committee. We recognize the extensive work that goes on in organizing and planning a conference such as this, and we really appreciate your excellence. And thanks for making the effort to drive from Yorkton, Saskatchewan, Eunice. I would also like to thank the Planning Committee members, Ariel Wilcox, Ashley Bell, Tara Tolucas, Abby Kwadza, Stephanie Mason, and Olamide Larry Watu. I commend the GNSA for their success in hosting the APN conference for 14 consecutive years. That is quite an accomplishment. And it's particularly noteworthy as most of our graduate students are working while studying. And so at the same time, they're still making this contribution in this way. So thanks to all that are involved. The APN conference is addressing a very important topic, and one that is very timely, and one that's very important to us in the College of Nursing, and in particular the Nurse Practitioner program. Intersectoral collaboration is now also an accreditation standard to the Canadian Association of Schools of Nursing, and certainly one that we're striving to achieve. So I look forward to hearing from our 3 stellar speakers this evening to learn more from their lived experience in relation to intersectoral collaboration. I extend a very warm welcome to our 3 panelists, who are all well known to us. And so a special welcome to Stephanie Van Holt, who's our esteemed PhD student, and also the Patient Services Director for WRHA Indigenous Health Program. Welcome to Lisa Merrill. I'm seeing my speakers here, but anyway, yeah, there you are, okay. Who is the Provincial Nursing Practice Lead for Shared Health's Provincial Coordinated Health Services. I have the privilege of working together with Lisa on various initiatives and committees. And then a special welcome to Cindy Fehr, a practicing nurse practitioner who also provides leadership as the CEO of the Nurse Practitioner Association of Manitoba. And we really value your contribution as a member of our Nurse Practitioner Program Advisory Council. So thank you all for the exemplary work that you're doing, and we'll really look forward to your presentation here tonight. At the College of Nursing, we are privileged to have the opportunity to provide graduate education to prepare advanced practice nurses for their critical role within the healthcare system. We have delivered our graduate program for more than 43 years and are proud of our more than 600 graduates from the programs over the years. Our master's program has 4 streams of administration, education, clinical practice, and nurse practitioner. Last year, we celebrated the 25th anniversary of our nurse practitioner program. And we are one of the first nurse practitioner programs in Canada to achieve accreditation through the Canadian Association of Schools of Nursing. And we remain one of only 2 accredited NP programs in Canada. Our PhD in nursing program began in 2013, and we're proud of our graduates to date and that they're providing exemplary service and leadership in healthcare and in the College of Nursing. So we're very proud of our graduates, and even more proud that many of them are now faculty within the College of Nursing. What a great recruitment strategy, right? So the College of Nursing is committed to advancing intersectoral collaboration and incorporating this into our graduate programs. So I'm excited to learn more from Lisa, Stephanie, and Cindy. And thank you all for coming again, and enjoy the evening.
Thank you very much. So I'll call on Lisa. introduced.
Good evening, hi. So Eunice wrote to me, I don't know, what was it, February probably, and asked if we could have an elder open the conference. So I asked Dr. Elder Mary Wilson to come and do the honors. I didn't bring tobacco for her, but I think Sharon might have. So now's a good time to pass that to her because she'll use the tobacco to kind of, to help her with what she needs to say.
It's a contract.
Here, she'll teach.
This is the contract, okay? So what this is, so I'm gonna turn this into a learning moment for everybody because this is really important. So what you need to do is ask me and know what you're asking.
On behalf of the APN Conference Committee Planning, I would ask you if you would conference and share your knowledge.
Okay. That's a big ask. So when you ask me to share knowledge with you, you see, now this is where it gets tricky, okay? So I know her intention and her heart is really good, but when you have that ask, and you say share your knowledge, are you talking about now? Are you talking for this evening? Are you talking for the rest of your life?
Oh, well,
Are you talking
let's limit it to
okay, so you see, this is why it's a teaching moment, right?
for now, though I could probably learn lots, but for now, we'll
So tonight, so your ask is?
would you accept this tobacco from the APN Conference Planning Committee, share your knowledge for this moment?
This evening.
For this evening. Okay, I got there.
Yeah, you're good. And yes, I'll accept that, okay? So from your left hand, so
Yeah,
from
you
your heart,
Yes, I
my
got
heart, okay? So that is why we share
That's
tobacco.
Ariel taught me that one.
Because this tobacco is truly a contract between people. And so when I leave here tonight, I will actually take this tobacco and get it ready for the full moon ceremony, and it will actually be burned at the full moon ceremony in prayer. Yeah, so I actually take this and then pray for all of you here as a part of my contract for you and accepting this tobacco. So thank you. Hi.
Thank you.
Okay, so my name is Ogamake Pevitit Naihaskanwa. Can you say that? Okay, go for it. That's your test. Yeah, she's had 7 years to practice. Don't let her fool you. 7 years of practice, yes, because she's been walking with me for 7 years as my helper. So it means that if I've chosen somebody to be a helper to me, it means really hard work, number one. Really hard work. Because I'm tough. I'm really tough. I'm really sensitive. I'm really kind. But man, those protocols are just like, I'm very, very strong with protocols. And I go with the old ways of knowledge rather than the adapted. That's a very good word. Thank you very much. Whoever said that to me? An adapted version of what traditional knowledge would be. So I go way back. And so when I take this tobacco, I take this very seriously. This is the contract. And then the gift to me is whatever it is, what the gift would be. Outside of that, but that's besides the point. This is my contract. And this really counts. And I have been gifted. I am kin to the wolf. So that would be my family line. And I've been gifted already this evening with another relative. Right? We have discovered that she is related to my, that you are related to my daughter-in-law who has grandchildren. And so that makes us relatives, close relatives. So I'll be calling her things like daughter from now on, or niece, or yeah, it would bring her right into my circle. So if she ever needs anything here in Winnipeg, she knows that she can go to one of my children, which would be an adopted daughter, which would be Stephanie, because she's studying with me. And believe me, it's hard. The lessons I teach take years to learn. It's not just here's your teaching. They're years long, and then all of a sudden something comes up. So I think you should know these things about real Indigenous knowledge, is that it's fluid. It moves, it changes. You know, we don't believe that we are separate from anyone. To me, we are all related. I'm related to, oh, there's some trees out there. Oh my gosh, I might just have a problem here. No, I'm kidding, I'm kidding. I've got a dry sense of humor. Anyway, but the trees outside I'd also see as one of my relations, but I would have a lot of respect for a tree like it would be an elder because it's lived so much longer than me. So I'd be very, very careful with those trees. And so, you know, we plant at least 10 trees a year, just because I need to do that every year. And whether they be in my yard or in somebody else's yard or somewhere else, we make sure that those trees are shared and that those seeds are passed. Because those trees will last a lot longer with any luck than we do. That's what we hope for, that our planet survives us, that the Mother Earth that we all walk upon is strong enough to sustain us and what we leave behind. And so with Gen Z, they're learning right now, right? And yeah, they're a little tenacious thing. So, you know, I'm very fortunate. We've had teachings. Both Steffi and I share. She's like an auntie to my granddaughter. Therefore, I've had blue hair. Therefore, she has lovely lashes. Because we let them be creative with us in a way of expressing their own love and creativity. We allow that to occur, right? We allow that. We say, come, okay, let's go. Let's do this. No problem. So as a grandmother, and old enough to be a great-grandmother, my oldest grandchild is 30. My youngest is 3. Thank you, Tracy. You know, Tracy's related to you. So, you know, they share that Kofi name. It's a beautiful family name. And so, yeah, it's an interesting life. And so when I'm asked to pray, there's a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of sharing, a little bit of giving, a little bit of love. And so as I announce my name, I'll call on the creator of a life. So I will do that right now. Creator, it's me, Ogamake Pemchipnai Haskanawa, and I call on you, creator of all life, of all nations, of all people, all plants, all water, all rivers, all earth, all beings, all life. I call on you, creator of all life, of the stars of the universe, to be present with us tonight, to send your helpers to those who need help and that need support. And I call on you, creator, to bring safety and kindness into each and every one of your hearts. Creator, I call on you and I thank you for those things. I thank you, Creator, for blessing each and every one of the people here and their families. And I thank you, Creator, for blessing us with the ability to laugh out loud, cry real hard, share knowledge, and be with one another in an open way with transparent hearts. And I thank you, Creator, for giving us the beautiful life and the breath that we all breathe. Hi. So I thank you for that time that you've allowed me to share with you in prayer and in kindness and in good wishes for each and every one of you to sail to the top, embracing each other like you belong together, like pieces of a puzzle. And I really do wish and pray for you all to have nothing but success from this day forward. Hi. And I thank you. And now you can call the next person. How's that? because you are a beautiful soul.
See, now I'm kerfuffled now, I lost my little paper. Ah, see, sorry, Lisa. You got me thinking, see? All right. So now we'll have Lisa Merrill. She's the Provincial Nursing Practice Lead, Provincial Coordinated Health Services, Shared Health, and has over 30 years of nursing and leadership experience. Lisa has held various nursing positions over the course of her career. She is co-chair of the recently established Provincial Clinical Nurse Specialist Network. In her current role, she represents nursing on a provincial and national level to provide support and counsel to senior leaders across the province. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the invitation to come and speak with you today. I'm very excited to be here, having been a graduate of University of Manitoba Faculty of Nursing. It doesn't feel like it was that long ago, but it has been. So no, it is really exciting to be here, so I do thank all of you for that. As Karen mentioned, so my current role with Shared Health is one of intersectoral collaboration. So I do a lot of that work in my everyday life. And so I've been in this job for about a year. And it's been fascinating to learn more and more and more every day and learn lessons learned from lots of things as well. But I've had a lot of opportunity to really be present and do a lot of that work. So I have been fortunate to work with academic institutions, as Nisa mentioned, regulators, so the College of Registered Nurses, licensed practical nurses, and the College of Registered Psychiatric Nurses. Our community partners, employers across all of Manitoba, so as Shared Health, we're sort of really representative of the province and working with every region and site across Manitoba. So that includes working with our provincial nursing practice leaders, so the chief nursing officers within Manitoba. And I report directly to Monica Warren, who is the Shared Health CNO, and also the COO for Provincial Coordinated Health Services. So lots of great opportunities, and I have had lots of learning. So I'm going to start just to kind of go through my slides here. I have a fancy, I've been doing presentations over Teams now for years, I feel like, since the pandemic, so I'm going to give me a little bit of grace, because this is going to be we hardly do in-person presentations anymore. So here we go. I went the wrong way. Oh, I think it's going backwards. There you go. Okay, there is my title. So intersectoral collaboration. So it was very interesting when I got the invite from you, and it just really brought me back to my time here at the university, and also with the Graduate Student Association, and my memories of this University of Manitoba Faculty of Nursing include conference planning as well. So I just wanted to flip to just this idea of coming here today to present. I just wanted to show you this picture from the 2015 Biennial CAPN Conference. So the title of the conference was Unleash the Power, Innovate, Collaborate, and Lead. And so this was a joint conference led with CNSs. So we have the CNS, Manitoba CNS interest group, and also our colleagues, our nurse practitioner colleagues as well. So it was a joint conference held at Fort Garry. And one of my very special memories of meeting one of the amazing nursing leaders, and that is Dr. Jeanette Rogers. So I was thrilled to meet her, and for those of you, I'm sure many of you or all of you may know her. So Dr. Rogers, she had a PhD in nursing from the University of Alberta, executive director for CNA in the 1980s, International Council of Nurses. She did a lot of work with them. And she's been the senior VP of professional practice and the chief nursing executive for the Ottawa Hospital, and has done amazing work, especially with health policy, quality of healthcare and nursing practice. So I had a fangirl moment that day and meeting her, and I had a few more this year at the International Council of Nurses Conference in Montreal. It's amazing to see all the leaders that you learn about and actually meet in person. So I just had to mention that. It kind of gives me chills to meet all of those famous nursing leaders that we look up to so much. So I just want to do a quick overview. What is intersectoral collaboration? Some examples of just in my personal experience. I'm going to speak to Partners in Intercity Integrated Prenatal Care Project. So for many of you will remember Dr. Maureen Heeman, who this is her study, and I was a graduate student of hers here when she was doing the initial research that then led to that project. And so I'll go through that a little bit about what my lessons learned and my exposure to that. Next, I'm going to talk about the Authorized Prescriber Initiative, which is a shared health provincial initiative that I'm involved with, not from the beginning, but just recently. And then some key learnings, and so then we'll go from there. So there's many definitions of intersectoral collaboration, and so for me, I had a hard time deciding which one I wanted to sort of present to you. The first one is from PHAC in 2016. So it's the joint action taken by healthcare and other government sectors, as well as representations from private, voluntary, and nonprofit groups to improve the health of populations. And the next one was shorter and a little bit more to the point. So it was working with more than one sector of society to take action on an area of shared interest to achieve better results than those obtained working in isolation. And so that I felt that was quite a nicely summed up definition of intersectoral collaboration. And then the last one, and this came from there's a website, Arctitude Institute of Community-Based Research, and I think it really hit the key points. So it's a coming together of different people, organizations, and sectors to work together to understand and solve complex issues. Complex issues every day in the healthcare system. These partnerships are mutually beneficial relationships that bring together different perspectives, knowledge, and skills for increased effectiveness, efficiency, quality, and sustainability. With an enhanced capacity to resolve complex health and social issues, intersectoral collaboration can result in significant and sustainable change. And so I feel like that is a very good description about what we try to do every day with intersectoral collaboration. And so to start off, intersectoral collaboration experiences for me, I had to think back about when was I first exposed to that? So where I actually realized what that meant. And I went right back to the Partners in Intercity Integrated Prenatal Care Project. I was very, very fortunate to work with Dr. Maureen Heeman in this capacity, both as a graduate student when I assisted with some of her data collection and doing some of her data analysis as well. And so what I can tell you is that I learned a lot from her. And I was very, very lucky to then, when I went into a role in Women's Hospital, into a CNS position, was when this actual project, which came out of her initial results, came to fruition. And it was really the first time that I realized what this meant. And so her original study was based, it was on perceived barriers and facilitators that to prenatal care for inner city women in Winnipeg. And so at this time there were lots and lots of ways that we were feeling that there were barriers to getting health care for pregnant women. And so what Maureen, Dr. Heeman did was that she really brought together an enormous group, and I'll kind of go through some of the stakeholders that she included. But it was really to look at the implementation of interrelated health system improvements. So what was facilitated was community-based prenatal care. There was a street outreach initiative, and then a social marketing campaign that she did. The project itself, it started in 2012, and then went until the evaluation phase, which was, I think, done at the end of 2015. So in this project, women who were eligible for this with this program, if they lived in inner city, Point Douglas downtown or Inkster community areas, had no prenatal care or were assessed as being at risk for having inadequate prenatal care in their current pregnancy. So that included things like late initiation of prenatal care, a low number of visits during by that stage in their pregnancy, or if they had a history of no prenatal care or what was defined as inadequate prenatal care in previous pregnancies. So essentially we were recruiting candidates that had risk factors for that so that we could try to facilitate reducing barriers for them to access care. So the study used a mixed methods approach with the program evaluation design. It combined both quantitative and qualitative components in research and to assess the impact really of the health system improvements and what that meant to reduce barriers for women accessing prenatal care. There's also a population-based component of this initiative, and that was done through an evaluation through the Manitoba Centre for Health Policy to evaluate the population-based rates of prenatal care in those three areas, sort of a pre and post review of that. So I'm not going to go into all of the details of the study itself, but what I can say is that what we did to facilitate and what this project did was we involved midwifery, we involved street outreach, so we had relationships built with street connections, public health, primary care, and really were able to bring women along where they were at and really reduce the barriers to accessing care. So we did have some incentives that helped get the women get for care. So some of those being, we provided some bus tickets or taxi slips to them. We offered meals, so if they came to the hospital, there was a meal voucher that was provided so they could go and have something to eat, and really tried to welcome them and tried to fast track them through to get the care that they needed. So again, things like, if someone wasn't showing up on time or missed their appointment and came at a different day or different time, if they were part of our study, we'd fast track them right the way through. So we brought them in. And the history of that was they would normally be turned away, right? You miss your appointment and you just don't get to be seen. So we had a lot of culture changes that were required to make that happen. And so I was the PIPC coordinator for the women in HSC. And so that was part of what I did, was help do that facilitation through. But again, it was a collaboration, multi partners, and it really took a lot of effort to get everybody going in the right direction. But what I found was that we had membership that was all in and all on board, and we all had the same goal, which was to improve the experience of women coming for care, welcome them, and to facilitate access to prenatal care by reducing those barriers. So it's a really fascinating and wonderful project to be part of. I just wanted to flip to the list of some collaborators. So this is not an extensive list of people that were involved in this project, but it just gives you an example of sort of how many people were involved, and the work that Maureen Heeman did to facilitate this project. And so I think it was like visionary. It took a lot of coordination, and I believe that she really tagged everybody that needed to be in. So her stakeholder groups were vast, and we all had different sort of groups that we led. So I helped with some of the street outreach as well, with street connections and helping facilitate that with the women to get to the hospital as well. So I just wanted to give you a quick look at sort of what that looked like. And and I feel like the outcome of that. So if you think about it, she had funding, she had I think CIHR grants, she had lots of government facilitators. We had groups from every bit of the community that would have had any kind of access or touch women who were pregnant in those areas. And the final report was issued in 2017, and the link is there, but I would really encourage you to take a look at how the project was kind of created and how it was developed over time, and just the overarching themes that were found, and just how amazing it was of a project to be participating in. There was a knowledge translation workshop in 2015, and I think at that event, I believe that was sort of when I realized the scope of it. When you see all of the people together coming in to look at how, like, what are the best things to come out of this and the most important things to take forward, and then also what do we need to do to keep facilitating that work and continue that, all of those things for women within the inner city. So it was a really exciting event, and it really brought everyone together with a common goal, again, to really continue that work. Outcome. So I would say if we looked at the intersectoral collaboration, I'll say the results of the study, I'll tell you about the results of the study just in general, that they did indicate that the project reduced barriers to care, improved communication and teamwork between providers and programs, and created positive change in service delivery, resulting in improved use of prenatal care, better pregnancy outcomes, and fewer infant apprehensions for inner city women at risk of inadequate prenatal care. Results also suggest that this intervention was associated with a decreased inadequate prenatal care at a population level in those targeted areas, and the project exemplifies how building successful partnerships involving researchers, clinicians, administrators, and policymakers can contribute to the health system improvement. And the outcome of this, so it's been many, many years later, and what I wanted to say is that this project actually put in place relationships that have been long-standing and have lasted. So it's not something that, even though it was not funded permanently to continue, the initiative and the things that we did to shift the healthcare system to welcome and bring those women into the fold, make things less difficult and reduce the barriers, those relationships stayed. So a lot of those practices still to this day are facilitated. So again, trying to make it just more flexible and welcoming and kind to women accessing care. So I feel that there are still lots of opportunities that we talk about this project all the time. When I was in women's health, this is one of the things that we would really like to continue emulating, and repeating over time, and making sure that that it needs to stay the way that we had it going forward during that time. So exciting opportunities. There's lots of future possibilities, but lessons learned for that, I think were really key for the teams that were involved in that. So the next one is the Authorized Prescriber Project. So this initiative is something that started well before I came into my role. So it was as far back as I think 2018. So this is an initiative what is an authorized prescriber, someone might want to know. So it's a registered nurse or registered psychiatric nurse who has completed a specialized education program so that they can prescribe medications for specific populations. So there's 3 practice areas of focus. First is sexual health and reproductive health, specific to SCBBI. Travel health and diabetes management is sort of the last thing, although that has not been rolled out, it is pending. The reason for this is that there was significant public need for nurses to have an expanded role specific to authorized prescribing. We have currently like a high rate of STIs in our community, particularly syphilis, gonorrhea, and chlamydia. And so these are sort of the target areas and basically for access to that care provincially. So we have, as you all know, remote and rural communities that maybe don't have access to a nurse practitioner, a physician in their community. So it was really important to see how else could we reach those populations. So that is what this is about. The benefit of this is that it does target gaps in access and care. It also decreases healthcare costs as it's a nurse-driven approach to care, again, kind of expanding that scope of practice. And it promotes timely treatment for Manitobans in the area of sexual, reproductive health, diabetes management, and travel health. So the goal is expanded the RN RPN scope of practice to better meet the needs of Manitoba. So this courses are offered through Red River Polytech and also through Athabasca University. Red River offers the full program, including clinical placements, and Athabasca offers prescriber therapy online. So you can do the first piece of it there online and then transfer into Red River to continue the practice. So the designation is an AP, so authorized prescriber, and that is a notation that once you complete that program, you are listed as an authorized prescriber in the College of Registered Nursing College or the College of Psychiatric Nurses. It's on the registry, so that's where you hold that. So planning for this role began in 2018, probably a little bit before that, with the transition of RNs and RPNs to under the Regulated Health Professions Act. So with that change, nurses were no longer able to prescribe. And when I say that, there's different ways of prescribing, and the way that nurses were kind of working around it to meet the needs of what our patient populations were was to have a photocopy of a doctor writing an order, and then that would be sort of their standing order, and that was no longer possible with related to a delegation of function. So that was not something that would fit with that with the legislation. So we had to come up also with another way to be able to do that, because that moment the RPHA went in, nurses could no longer do that. So this is one way to do that. And with that change, the intersectoral collaboration partners have been through Manitoba government, so there was funding and the recognition that this was an important thing to have. There's also changes to the regulation to include RNAPs. Healthcare employers, so again, it's a provincial approach to making sure that we are able to provide access to care across Manitoba. There was also collaboration between the nursing regulators and then also with academic institutions to get that completed. I just put the link up there for anyone who's interested in looking a little bit more at the authorized prescribers. Okay, and I'm just trying to think how much time I have, but I just wanted to check. Okay, perfect. So I just wanted to go then now to enablers. So there's things that are very key when you look at having intersectoral collaboration. And then the one thing we mentioned is a shared vision of the problem to be addressed and the success of that collaboration. I think everyone realizes communication is key as well to everything that we do. And mutual and joint benefits for partners and collaboration as well. Because sometimes you have to make sure that that your collaboration is just not benefiting one person instead of both of you. It makes it much easier if everybody has something to gain out of that and is motivated to make change. Clarity of roles and responsibilities is also something that is extremely important. And the other thing to mention is that when you're looking at working with across sectors, really when you're starting to think about your planning is to understand what changes that might create for the system as a whole. And sometimes we get into, I have really excellent ideas and start to put things in play, and then we realize that, oh, oops, I forgot about this piece. And sometimes, for whatever reasons, it isn't actually something that's possible, or you need to kind of shift and do something in a different way. So it's good to always be mindful of that. Yes, and also capacity. So who is able to assist with this? You need time, qualified people. You need budget and funding sometimes to get that moving forward. And also trust is really important as well with the collaborating partners that you identify. Lots of strong leadership, and it's great when you have people who are engaged and excited about the opportunity so that you're all really motivated to move things forward. And and that people are willing to support all the updates that may come with policy changes and otherwise. I think the one thing that I think that is important to remember, and I know that it's really just been recently that I have had the opportunity to work so closely with intersectoral partnerships. And I think what's super important, and I think Dr. Heeman, her research really identifies how broad, right, that partnership and the scope of that is. And that's really amazing that what is able to be accomplished with that. I can say that at the time, I don't think I had the awareness of what was happening actually, and to watch it in hindsight and have been a part of that, it is really amazing to me to know the kind of work and dedication that it takes to actually move something like that forward and get everybody on board and on the same page to move it through, because it was amazing that of all the changes that came. So I think that's one thing to remember, is really broad scope and think as far as you can, engage all the right stakeholders in that as well. And the other thing I thought I would like to just to kind of put out there is that we often try, like these are really big projects, but often it's starting small, right, with different projects or things that you're doing more of a clinical part. And that's great, and it's great to think about ideas and potential projects or initiatives that you might like to do. And sometimes what happens is that, like, you're raring to go and you bring everybody in, but what happens is the system isn't ready for it yet. You may not have buy-in from the people that you need to have buy-in from to move things forward, or there might not be the funding available to do that. So when things like that happen, don't get discouraged, because I've been there, and you just sort of set it up on your shelf, whether that's on the shelf of your mind or on your shelf in your office, and then you wait until the opportunity arises, and you watch and wait, and then eventually you just plant the seed, and eventually something will sprout. So I just wanted to make sure you heard that message, because not everything works out as planned. And that's one thing that I've learned for sure through all of my interactions, I'd say most recently as well, right? There's lots of big decisions, there's lots of important people, lots of stakeholders that need to be engaged, and sometimes not everyone is going in the right direction, or it will take time to bring everyone together. So those are my lessons from my own experiences thus far, and but it's super exciting, and when you see wins and you see positive things that come, it makes everything worthwhile, and it's a time to celebrate. So.
We'll just open up to questions first in the room, and then we'll go on to the online one. Anybody have questions they want to ask Lisa?
Thank you for your presentation. I guess I'm just curious, kind of from a personal standpoint, like, are you able to discuss some of the barriers that are happening for advanced prescribing for diabetes care, and why they're happening? Because I feel that disproportionately affects Indigenous people here in the province of Manitoba, so I'd like to hear more.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I'll say it's not that the barriers are just, we haven't got, I think the program hasn't quite been approved, and the other thing that we need to do is involve stakeholders and make sure that we are clear and where within the province and where we need to target those nurses to be able to prescribe there. So that's part of it. Our other part will be to find support for practicum. So for people to align the advanced, like the authorized prescriber nursing, like who have just graduated or just passed their courses, who they can have to support them. We have had some difficulty sometimes finding enough people to do that. We sometimes have them, teed up with physicians or with an NP in the communities, but we do need to kind of work a little bit of that out. But that's coming, so it's definitely on our radar, and working hard on that.
Anybody else in the room? Online, Harriet? No. Thank you very, very much for sharing that. I come to get you.
I'm coming.
Well, we're switching things up.
Okay,
Okay, come on down.
okay.
I'll just speak from here, and I wanted to also say thank you to you, Una, for personalizing the land acknowledgement. That's what we're looking for. As Indigenous people, we're looking for that personalization and how you view and how you see the land acknowledgement. And so she did a remarkable job, and it was thoughtful and thought-provoking, and I just want to congratulate you on that. That's a beautiful piece of work.
Yeah, truly from the heart, right?
Yeah.
Did you get your picture? All right, well, we'll welcome Cindy here. She's over 30 years of healthcare experience, inclusive of very clinical areas, education, leadership, and research. She's currently practicing in southern Manitoba as a nurse practitioner focused on functional aesthetic and regenerative wellness. She's the CEO for the Nurse Practitioner Association of Manitoba and sits on several provincial and national committees. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and inviting me to come and share some of my experience with intersectoral care. So Lisa did a great job because now I can skip through lots of different slides and I'll have a little bit more time to share some of my experiences because, yeah, I usually have lots on there. Oh, there we go. So intersectoral collaboration, the Royal Advanced Practice Nurses. So an overview, I was going to give a brief bio, but you did such a great job, I don't need to do that. I may add a bit, just some definitions we can skip over, some brainstorming. And then I want to look at our influence as individuals. So the micro, meso, and macro application. So I think that's really important to think of that small all the way to the big and dream big. That's where I'm going to leave off with. So brief bio has already been said. I think I need to add to that. I train in aesthetics and bioidentical hormone palettes. Functional medicine's my passion. So yeah, that's my new area. And then I'm a big city girl. I grew up in Ottawa and Vancouver, and my husband moved us out here to Manitoba, and we now live on a 40-acre farm where I'm learning to be a country girl. So yeah, life changes, right? Learning in all different ways. So definitions I think we can skip over, although I really want to differentiate between health and wellness. So when we think of health, of course, that's the physical body, but really wellness is so much bigger than that. And I want you to see it from my lens. So my lived experience and my lens is really from a wellness model, really looking at that holistic approach, encompassing health, but also the aspects of life, personal fulfillment, emotional stability, balance of lifestyle, quality of life, those things that give us joy, passion, not just a health span or a lifespan, but a health span and a wellness span, so that our life years are lived well, right? And when we look at intersectoral collaboration, it really talks about social determinants of health. So not just looking at those physical health parameters, but also what influences that from a far broader kind of aspect, but also the policies, agendas, social norms, powers, and political systems that influence our lived environment and how we are living in our environment, right? So we've heard a little bit about that. We know about reconciliation. We should know about that by now. And we're learning more about how we do that in a genuine way. So advanced practice nursing, I think that CNA has a very limited perspective, CNSs and NPs. I like to look at it larger than that. Anybody that has advanced knowledge and application for that knowledge really should be an advanced practice nurse. It shouldn't just be about the practice or the clinical basis of it. So we are all having advanced knowledge, that we're leaders, we're collaborators, we're educators, we're researchers, we're in change management and professional development, and that's what WRHA looks at, those kind of domains of practice. So intersectoral collaboration, we went over that. Lisa did a great job, so I won't stick with that. Principles, again, effectiveness, efficiency, quality, sustainability, and power in numbers and diversity and voice and inclusiveness for me is really, really important when it comes to intersectoral collaboration. So getting outside of our pillars and looking more broadly to include. So I'm going to give you some examples. So these are just a few, but these are ones that are really powerful and meaningful to me and people that I know are involved in them. So we look at the community health centers in Ontario that are nurse practitioner led. So they were really built out of passion for communities that didn't have care. And nurse practitioners wanted to provide the care, but there wasn't the mechanism within the system to do it. So they went outside of the system. Some of them are private practice now, and Ottawa has a few of them, and then across Ontario there are more private practice ones, so working outside of the system. But also, this was a grassroots perspective. So it was really about community coming together to say, how can we fund these community centers that are not just about health, but they're about social wellness, about accessibility for education, for being able to have healthy food, being able to learn how to cook that food, just a broader sense. So these are amazing examples. If you ever get to tour any of them in Ontario, I highly recommend it. And I know a number of the nurse practitioners that are involved with them. So near and dear to my heart. Safe consumption sites, or safe injection sites as they were previously known in BC. My daughter had two launched children who are both nurses in BC. And one of them did a practicum actually at the safe consumption site, and she still volunteers there. And I have a nurse practitioner colleague who actually goes and provides care in the safe consumption sites in the downtown. So these are really set up, again, looking outside of just health. What is it that creates community and a place of safety for people? And so it's not just about creating a place of harm reduction and safe consumption of substances, but it's really about giving a safe place for people to congregate, to feel like they can have a space to ask their questions. They have a sock bin that they can get dry socks from because it's rainy in Vancouver, and they have access to food. They have vouchers they can get for various different places as well. And so that's another, and there's nurse practitioners that are involved in that as well. So another example, and I want to say there were some advanced practice nurses, not like necessarily NPs or clinical nurse specialists, but other nurse leader roles. Now the mobile food market isn't really a nurse-led or nurse practitioner-led, but I think it really speaks to the potential that we have, bringing services to people rather than people having to find those resources themselves. So it's thinking outside the box, right? How can we bring accessible, safe, really quality food to the people that maybe don't have the resources or the means to be able to get to the supermarket, to be able to, they may have 4 or 5 kids that they have to drag with them on the bus, and that's not really going to be an accessible place for them, right? So that I thought in Nova Scotia was a really good example of intersectoral collaboration, and they got some of the funding from, I did some digging on it, they got funding from local enterprise, so industry, to be able to set up these mobile units and be able to have produce that comes from local providers that's often donated to them that they don't actually have to pay for. And the last one I want to talk about is near and dear to my heart because I did part of my internship as an NP at Maxine Wright Shelter. So this was, it's a women's shelter and resource center and health center that is focused on women that are at risk or experiencing violence. And so it's run by a nonprofit, Atira Women's Resources, a nonprofit society that really epitomizes intersectoral collaboration. So they actually have government involved, they have private sector involved, they have volunteer organizations, they have a grassroots effort from the women that are actually experiencing or have been at risk for violence involved in the development of the center. So I went there as a student. You'll see that, so the building, they're actually building onto it in this picture, but it's 3 floors and there's a building behind it. The ground floor is the daycare. So they have a fully funded daycare. Nobody that attends a daycare has to pay for daycare. The second floor is the
shelter. So it's an emergency shelter for women that can show up at any point in time. There's a doorbell, you ring it, you're invited in. And it's set up as in mini apartments, and so they can bring their children, they don't have to come by themselves. And the top floor is a health center and resource center. So there was a clinic there, and again, it was all drop-in. You just come and you show up and we give care. And then there is a resource center where there's a food kitchen, so they learn how to cook, they get free food. There is an elder that helps support cultural connectedness. There was educators there to help with any sort of learning skills they needed to be able to work their resume, to be able to apply for jobs, to be able to fill out the enormous amount of forms that we have from our government. Well, BC government, maybe not so much here, but government tends to have a lot of forms. And then in behind is the short-term stay. So up to 18 months, the women can transition from the emergency shelter to the short-term shelter. And in that process of time, often are able to set up resources and maybe get a job or be able to find resources to pay for their own housing that is supported in that transition with Atira and Maxine Wright. It's an amazing experience and really showed like all of the beds were donated by industry. So there wasn't a single mattress that they had to pay for or bed or any of the furnishings. It was all by industry that they just did the work and they said, hey, we're a nonprofit, we need your money, we need your help. These are women that need your help. And there was an outpouring of philanthropy. So it's possible, even though we have these structures in place and there's not maybe the funding within the system, there's lots of money outside of the system. So think big. Yeah, so that was my experience there. And yeah, lots of volunteers. There was even justice. So even in the healthcare center, we had a social worker that was dedicated just to the women. She had no connection to any sort of children's apprehension or like there was no fear. That resource was there for the women to support the women. There was definitely justice was involved because there was a lot of women that were that had substance use issues and so but wanted to desperately change their lives and improve the care and well-being for their children and their families. So they had lots and lots of supports. It was an amazing place. And again, if you ever get out to BC, I would highly recommend you check that place out. So think big. So who's involved in intersectoral collaboration? I would say governments of all levels, so provincial, federal, provincial, regional, municipal, anybody and everybody you can tap on the shoulder gets involved. Service provider, that's you. Service recipients, that's the grassroots perspective. Nonprofits, community coalitions, information and community links or communication links, private sector, philanthropic opportunities, and a magnitude of other stakeholders. So, you know, there's lots of money out there. I have to say there are lots of people that, you know, donate. And while I love dogs and animals, there are lots of people that leave their estates to the Humane Society. But if we gave them other opportunities to leave their estates and money to, or be able to, you know, have a direction and a purpose for that money, be people, I think there would be a lot more. And we just have to ask, and ask in the right way. So what are the future needs? There's lots. There's representatives within government. I think nurses, we need to have more nurses within government. Health, social decision-making, advocacy tables, pioneers and thought disruptors. So as an advanced practice nurse, I think that's part of my role is to ask the whys and the why nots and to challenge hegemony or our thinking of why we did it the way we did it in the past is not always how we have to have the path for the future. And so why can't we have our dreams? Why can't things work out? And I'll give you an example of that in a second. And then just the research and publications. The more we get out there, the more we tell our story and our visions, the better we are together. Small collaborative voices become strong when we're combined together. That's my mantra. All right, so my examples. So I was involved, when I moved to Manitoba, I was involved with the quick care clinics that were just starting up in Manitoba. Then I was involved with a mobile clinic, which is basically a clinic on wheels. And then I moved out to Swan Lake. It was a brand new position for a nurse practitioner with 2 doctors. So the doctors that were there before were fee for service, and they changed it to a regional position or regional kind of runs facility. And so there were 2 internationally trained doctors and myself that joined us. We had a clinic with about 2 primary care clinics with about 3,000 patients and an 18-bed hospital. That's a really old picture of the hospital, but it's the only one I could find. And we had a fully functioning emergency department. So 2 years into a 4-year contract, COVID hit and the doctors left. And we couldn't find any more replacements. There were no doctors to be had, and certainly nobody was coming to Swan Lake. So we were told that the probability was our clinics would be shut down. And I live in the community too, so I had a bit of a heart there. The community clinics would be shut down as well as the hospital. And I am so thankful and blessed to have had a leadership team that didn't stick to the old ways and thought about, well, what else can we do? Especially we have Swan Lake First Nation beside us. That is a large reserve with a lot of people that need care, and they had a lot of instability in their healthcare services they were able to provide on reserve as well. So we were actually servicing an even greater number of people through our center. So what we were able to do was say, why not? What else can we do? And the powers that be listened when I said, hey, how about a nurse practitioner-led hospital and clinic? And it took a lot of meetings and a lot of persuasions, but there's also a lot of creative models that are out there, like the nurse practitioner-led clinics that are in Ontario. That was what we modeled some of that from. And then was there any nurse practitioner-led hospitals? No. There was a rehab hospital in Ontario that was nurse practitioner-led, but we said, hey, why not? And maybe it won't be exactly the same, and we'll need the support from other clinics and hospitals, but why can't we do it? So we met with municipal government, we met with the hospital foundation for funding, we met with local people that had money to be able to ensure that we had some funds for resources to teach, like to educate us, to get us, the nurse practitioners, up to speed. And so we ended up being 5 nurse practitioners in various different capacities of full-time and part-time. And we hired a nurse, and we went and changed from an emergency center to an urgent care. So we still had access, and it allowed us to provide the care to the community undisrupted. So there are possibilities. You just have to ask why and why not. And be prepared. The elevator speech, I think, do you have that still in the program? Elevator speech? Yeah, that came in really handy. I had to create my own elevator speech because I would actually go to the grocery store, and people, when I started in Swan Lake, people knew nothing about nurse practitioners, and all of the patients wanted to have the doctors. They're like, I want a doctor, I don't want a nurse practitioner, but they were going to be assigned to me, and I said, I don't want them assigned to me, I want them to choose me. And so I have to say, after about 8 months of being there, people got to know the value added of a nurse practitioner, and my practice was full after 8 months, and the doctor still had loads and loads, and had a little bit more capacity, but yeah, like I had that elevator speech down pat. Wherever I went, I spoke about nurse practitioners and talked to them, like in the grocery store, everywhere. My husband was sick of it, but yeah. And he protects me because people would also come up to the grocery store, and they'd ask me a clinical question. My husband would pop in, and he's like, well, unless you're ready to drop your pants, because this is not the clinic, then, so he is very protective of my time too. But I have to say, intersectoral collaboration just means there's lots and lots and lots of meetings and communication, but it's great. So the second one I have is a public health agency grant. So it's really hard to get money and to do anything. And so during COVID, there was a call for, just after COVID, there was a call for applications for a grant. It was $400,000 over 2 years to create education for healthcare providers and community health representatives to be able to help demystify vaccines and give them resources. So the Nurse Practitioner Association, because it had to be a non-profit, it couldn't be on the behalf of an organization or like University of Manitoba could apply for it. It was very specific. It had to be led by a non-profit or non-connected to government, things like that. And so we applied for it, unbeknownst, like totally, we were like shocked that we got the money, right, Elsie? We were like, oh, this is great, but shocked because then the work begins. But we were able to create four virtual simulation experiences for a variety of different scenarios, including an Indigenous perspective on what it's like to have somebody preach to you about the importance of vaccines when maybe that isn't the question that you're actually coming into the clinic about. Anyways, they were really, really good. And we have now applied for a second round of the grant of $500,000 over 2 years to be able to create more marketing in relation to Indigenous people in Manitoba, as well as gender diverse people. So that was the two.
You should just mention the Health Professionals Coalition and RX, Spirit RX and the 7 tribal councils.
So part of our intersectoral collaboration is thinking the big, and so we have an ongoing relationship and we meet regularly with the Manitoba Health Professional Associations Coalition. So it's a group of now 18 different organizations that come together with like minds and sort of connected interests in being able to pursue policy, social changes, government funding, things like that. And so they're a huge supporter of us. And Spirit RX is, they're the main kind of pharmacy delivery service up in the north, and so they have a lot of connections with the rural and remote communities. And so we were able to work really closely with them as well as some elders to be able to make sure that what we were developing is culturally appropriate, sensitive, and that we can not speak on other people's behalf, that we can actually lead them in the process. So we're hoping to do that again. So pray for us because we could really like to do it, right? With a broadened kind of scope in this next one. So my role is a facilitator, coordinator, leader, contributor, scholar to scholarship. I'm not a doer. I'm not the expert knowledge broker. I am not the expert in community nor population perspectives and needs. I engage with stakeholders and key knowledge holders. I liaise with marketing and education specialists, and I liaise with funders, elders, experts. I'm kind of like the hub. Everybody else does a lot of the work. It's like a lot of work and a lot of meetings, but I certainly am not that knowledge person. I depend on so many others in these projects, and I'm just a tiny little piece of it. So it starts with you. The micro, meso, macro. So I often think in these terms, what's the little bit that we could do, the bigger, and then what's the huge bit? So the micro, taking notes on inequalities and contributors. That's what we do every day in our lived experience, working with other people, questioning hegemony, right? So that taken for granted kind of experiences, just questioning that, like what, it's what's always happened. Okay, well, but why? And why does it always have to be that way? Can't we think differently? Advocating for those patients, families, populations, communities that are experiencing gaps in wellness or wellness supports. And then the meso, so looking at volunteering, that would be a role with community groups, sitting on the organizational RHA committees, government teams, joining the Nurse Practitioner Association. Who's got to do a plug for them? To get involved in our intersectoral education that we do. And our action initiatives, and then just becoming part of education, leadership, and the scholarship role on a broader sense, not just about yourself, but how do you get engaged with, helping to write an article or stimulating an article or working with people that are in a research team. And then macro would be influencing policy, so getting involved there bigger, dissemination of knowledge and opportunities for solutions, and political engagement. So why not run for office? Like, you could do it. We need more nurses in politics, right? That's not me, because I am totally not political. But yeah, we need to have more people that are not afraid to speak the truth, and be able to stand up for those that can't speak for themselves, and be able, but not forget the grassroots perspective, right? So, actually, I don't want to go there yet because we have a tiny bit more time. Teeny time. Okay, perfect. So I want you to think big, and I want you to. So who in this province, or what groups in this province? Because this is the active. You guys have to be active in this one. Who do you think are the populations or groups that are most at risk in this province? What do you think? What comes to the top of your head? What groups would you think are at risk? Anybody?
Indigenous women and girls and gender diverse people.
Thank you. Absolutely. Anybody else?
Youth in care.
Youth in care. Perfect. Anybody else?
Rural, remote,
Rural and remote. Absolutely.
new immigrants.
Absolutely. Often people think of mental health, people that have substance use challenges to overcome, justice issues, right? All of those. Right? So I want to add something with like the children in care. The one that's dear and dear to my heart that I want us to think big about is kids, because I've had a lot of personal but also professional experience with it, and that is kids in care in general. So not just youth, although those are a huge vulnerable population, but also just children in care. So Manitoba actually has one of the highest rates of children in care in Canada. It's disturbing. When I worked on the mobile clinic and in quick care clinic, we had kids come that were in foster care to us all the time. So the foster parents would bring the kids in for whatever. They would have them, maybe they would go and pick them up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and the next day would come for their wellness check. Because often there was parameters that you had to have this wellness check within 24 to 72 hours, that they had to be reviewed by a healthcare professional for a variety of things, right? So I often see them at quick care, and on our mobile clinic, we were in Woodridge and Dominion City. So Woodridge is kind of a real hubbub of, or hub for foster families, as a Steinbach. And I've now since realized Winkler, Borden area. And so in our system, I don't know if you understand, if you know about our foster system. I'm learning more about it from a personal perspective now, but there is the large CFS, so Child and Family Services is the large umbrella. And then we have different regional CFS hubs. So we have like Winnipeg, the one would be in Southern Health, IERHA. They all the regions have their own Child and Family Services. And then we have other agencies as well that would be like Métis, Midshif. There's a whole host of them. And then even in like Southern Health, where I worked, we had a hub that was Portage, one that was in Steinbach, and one that was in Winkler. And not a single one talked. None of them. We had kids that came to us, and they were 4, 5, 7, 18 years old. Not one piece of health care came with them. I didn't know if they had allergies. I didn't know if they were on medication. Unless the child could tell me themselves, we had no information. Zip. Social workers couldn't share it with us because it's privileged information. But I'm their healthcare provider. I'm supposed to give them care. They don't communicate. They still don't communicate. So you also have in the system, there's 24-hour emergency care. So it's meant to be for up to 1 month. There's short-term care that's meant to be for up to 3 months. Long-term care that's up to a year to 18 months. And permanent care. That's meant to be permanent for the rest of their life. Right? How can we make the system maybe not, like, how can we work better? What do we have in the system right now that we can learn from and replicate or scale up to make it better? And so I'm involved with lots of different meetings with the government, and with that. And so we have these My Health teams. My Health teams are really about a hub of care that is interdisciplinary and really meant to be this wraparound care that communicates the needs for people, really gets them where they're at. So you don't have to travel all these places. The care is there in your community. And so my question is, why can't we do that for kids in care? Why is it that we don't have a wraparound system, an interdisciplinary center in each of the regions for us to be able to have the foster families be able to say, I can go there and I know that there's going to be a nurse practitioner, social worker, educator, psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever they need, the MCFS or whoever's going to be there, there's a hub. So I don't have to figure out, because in Morden there's at least 6,000 patients waiting for a healthcare provider. So how am I ever going to get my kids in there? So how can we set up the system? How can we dream bigger and look at kids that are so vulnerable? They've all experienced trauma, because if you've been moved from your home, it's traumatizing, right? If you've been exposed indirectly or directly to trauma, like to violence, you've been traumatized. And then being moved from place to place because of this timeline that you don't meet is traumatizing. So how can we have less trauma, more connectedness for these kids who are our next generation? They're the ones that are going to take us into the future. They're going to be the world leaders. How can we empower them to be the best people that they can be in order to set up? If we can set up and think from an intersectoral collaboration perspective, how can we set up resources that will serve them better? Anyways, that's me. Finish my preaching off of my soapbox. But thank you. Thank you for your time, for listening, for dreaming with me, and yeah.
One comment, you asked a question. How can it be done? There's two things that you can do. Decolonize. Well, there's three things. Decolonize through anti-racism. And also understand that there is no such word as permanent when it comes to child and family services.
Absolutely.
There is no such thing as permanent. But what you can do is make sure, if you do have Indigenous children in your homes, take them to ceremony or expose them to the culture that they come from. Let them be your teacher.
100%. And we
Because that's how
absolutely,
they come to you as your teacher.
absolutely. I have to say that's been, I feel very honored and privileged to be able to experience all of that cultural connectedness through them and with them,
Yeah,
right?
It's societal and systematic injustice.
Yes.
It's a colonial problem. And so the faster we decolonize and bring equity back, the faster we're going to see more harmony. So learn from your kids.
Absolutely. They have so much to teach me too. Every day, honestly, every day they teach me, and I'm, honored to be part of it, but it breaks my heart that breaks my heart what we have in the system, and we can do better.
You can do better.
Thank you very much. Any questions before you go from the audience here? Any online area? No. Thank you, thank you.
Great job.
Thank you all very much. So next, we're going to invite Stephanie. She's been a nurse for many years. She's done a lot of work with a marginalized group, HIV, harm reduction. She didn't pay me to say this. She is very knowledgeable. I have learned a lot from her, and I hope you also learned something from her today.
So nice. Ashley, don't go away.
young mentors because I have no idea what I'm doing, and I knew Ashley, but this is perfect. Okay, let's see if that works.
No, got your.
Sorry to be a bit of a pain.
No,
Need a hand? Prima donna here, but this is the first time I could write my notes because I thought, well, they'll have notes.
Wendy's coming to the rescue.
I have this happen regularly, trust me. Okay.
I just need to flip it.
Okay.
It's just.
Camera one, camera two.
Yeah, we'll go from current.
Everyone needs a tech, yeah.
I'm trying not to show very much. So, an extend, it needs to be on main. Okay. 2. The problem is you probably won't get it there because it's going to show there. So unless your eyes are
I
really
can do
good,
that.
you're, okay.
I can do that. Okay. That's just enough. It's just to keep me on point. Okay, yeah. I'm ready. We're not seeing the Zoom people, but that's okay. All their cameras were off anyway. Okay. So, okay. Can everybody say that? Okay. Okay. So, that's Cree for water. And it's made up of 2 words, okay? Nia, Pamatsawan. Nia, Pamatsawan, which means I am life. And tomorrow is, I made this without knowing, tomorrow is International Water Day. And so Eunice did such a great job at honoring the territory. I just thought I would give a little nod to the water.
To the water.
To the water. Hi. So who am I? What am I doing here? This is me this winter up in Churchill. It's a beautiful day. It was February, I guess I was up there. And so I am a nurse. I'm a health leader. I've been a nurse for 20 years, 21 now. I'm a PhD student. I'm a Métis woman from Winnipeg. I'm a ceremony person. My spirit name is Kinikone Ochecheskiso, which is Cree for circling hawk, which means I'm a messenger. We talked about that today. And so I'm going to share some messages here with you. Eunice probably invited me here because I used to do a lot of work with the Manitoba HIV program, and we did this huge intersectoral collaboration called the Manitoba HIV STBBI Collective Impact Network. It is a mouthful. I love collective impact. It's a strategy for structured collaboration. We brought over $20 million of funding for research into the province for HIV, and I am not going to talk to you about any of it today. Because I thought we're advanced practice nurses, and so I want to talk to you about what I think, what I prayed over, would be helpful for us to know as advanced practice nurses. I work in the system. I'm right now, for a little while longer, the Director of Indigenous Health, Director of Patient Services for the Indigenous Health Program at the WRHA. And I see where the gaps are in terms of knowledge with our health leaders. I see where the gaps are for you as advanced practice nurses, so I'm going to make the best use of everyone's time. The next 15 minutes I think I have, because I value you. I will try and get you out of here on time. You probably have childcare, stuff to do, things to study. But I want to talk about, when we talk about harm reduction, see Eunice, I kept it in. What we're talking about, some of the various health entities working with Indigenous people in Manitoba and inviting communities to lead. And I just wanted to make a mention from the other 2 presenters. So PIPSI, great project. That started and came from the Mothering Project out of Mount Carmel Clinic. And it was an activist group of moms who use substances, who said the system does not work for us. So it's great to acknowledge our principal investigators. It's great to acknowledge those coalitions. But it was those mothers that really, in their activism and their voice, which created that change, and I think we need to honor them. Same thing when Cindy was talking, and she's talking about safe injection sites in Vancouver, BC. That was a group of people that used drugs that were sick of seeing their friends die of overdoses, and so they used to open up an illegal storefront every day, and they had a nurse that would come in and make sure that they could use drugs safely. And every night the cops would come and lock the doors, and then the people that used drugs would be up bright and early at 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning with bolt cutters to take the locks off the building. And so that's how that started. And so when we talk about inviting community to lead, I think that that's also where I want to center us today as advanced practice nurses. And I would talk about it from an Indigenous place. You can talk about it and think about it from wherever area you're in or what applies to you. So harm reduction, who's heard of it? Most people. You guys are going to give me a bunch of neoliberal babble about what? Giving people the right to choose, being responsible for their drug use, reducing their chances of HIV infection. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about what Indigenous people think about as harm reduction.
Yes.
Okay? So harm reduction is love. Love, universal love, how we love each other, how we're in community together. It focuses on relationships to yourself, to your family, to your lands, to your territories, to your community. And it extends beyond a narrow mainstream interventions designed to minimize the harms from substance use. Indigenous harm reduction means reducing the impacts of colonization, including substance use. Substance use is a symptom. And for me to sit and listen to people talk about reducing the harms from substance use, but it's okay for people to just keep using, I don't do that. I don't believe that. I believe better for Indigenous people.
Sundancer.
I'm a sun dancer. I've recovered, and it saved my life. Indigenous harm reduction is self-determination. This is an inherent birthright of Indigenous people on this land. So, what does this mean? This is from Chiefs of Ontario, no date. I pulled it off the internet during my master's thesis, so that was at least 2016, 2015, somewhere in there. We possess inherent rights to self-determination. These inherent rights were not endowed by any other state or nation, but are passed on through birthright. They're collective, and they flow from the connection to the Creator and to our lands. And so when we're talking about land acknowledgements, and we're talking about self-determination, especially for Indigenous people in healthcare, this is an inherent right of the people here. The UNDRIP says so, the United Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous People, international legislation. The TRC says so. Indigenous harm reduction is reconciliation. So that's the next piece of this. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this in my master's thesis. And it's both a process and an outcome, right? If I ask you what is reconciliation, people have a hard time defining it. It's a journey that we're all on together, but it's also a place that we're trying to arrive to. And there's the paradox, right? So you have to remember that this journey is taking place within the context of cultural genocide, which are the legacies to Canada's Indian residential school system, but they're happening this day. When Cindy was talking about child welfare, that's a colonization tactic that is still happening. Our health system is a colonization tactic. The way that we allocate resources and fund our health system is a tool of colonization. And we know this because the health gaps for Indigenous people are worsening and they're widening. They're not getting better. It's ongoing. So from an Indigenous place, if harm reduction is reconciliation, that's a commitment for all of us to enter into right relationship, which upholds the original intents of the treaties. And I can talk about that, but I'm not going to. Because I'll be here for a while. Where am I going? Cultural safety. So we've all heard this, right, as nurses, the term cultural safety. We should be very proud of this. This was a Maori nurse coined term. So back in the early 90s, Maori nurses got together in ceremony and came up with this concept of cultural safety. And a lot of people, I talk to a lot of nurses, a lot of nurse managers, a lot of social workers in the hospital, and they think cultural safety is cultural awareness, which means I recognize that I have a culture and that you have a culture, and I'm going to do things within my practice to accommodate your culture. And I think a lot of nurses get stuck there. But what actually cultural safety is a commitment to recognizing power imbalances. And so when we're thinking beyond the patient-provider level, and we're thinking about intersectoral collaboration, those collaborations are only as good as the individuals, families, and communities in terms of those populations at risk that we're aiming to support. Those collaborations are only as good as they deem, as they say so. It's not up to us as nurses or as systems leaders to pat ourselves on the back and say, well, we did it. That was a nice intersectoral collaboration. It's not us, it's the communities that we're serving. Indigenous harm reduction is anti-Indigenous racism. And that, I mean, I sit on the Disrupting Racism Working Group for Shared Health. I know that racism and isms, discrimination take place in many forms, but on this territory, anti-Indigenous racism is different. And the reason is that you have to go back to the land. This is a teaching from Mary. And so when you think about all the narratives that run through our culture, and does anyone here know when I say a fiduciary relationship? Fiduciary relationship. That's language that goes back to the Indian Act, which we're going to talk about. And that is this belief that the government of Canada was responsible for the well-being of Indigenous people because we couldn't care for ourselves. And so every piece of legislation that's ever existed, including residential schooling, including Canada Health Act and the Indian Act and all of the policies and procedures under that, is based on this idea that the government of Canada has fiduciary responsibility for Indigenous people. And that is racist. If you go anywhere else in the world and you said that there's a race-based document in my country that allows people to have differential access to health and social services, would you call that racist? We have it here. We're virtually the only developed country in the world that is getting away with it. So disrupting racism is a reflexive practice. It's an unlearning. When Mary says decolonization, it's looking at every narrative that we've been given since we were little that made us feel that we were somehow doing good by, doing good for, because people couldn't do it for themselves. It's integral to the reconciliation process. And really, and I could get into this, but I don't have time. We're talking about the integration of two disparate worldviews. Indigenous people see the world, understand the world, feel about the world differently. And that's not a metaphor. When we talk about Indigenous epistemology and ontology in our philosophy classes, it's real, it's different. And I can learn how to see the world through a Western lens. And so you can learn. I can't teach you how to be Indigenous, but I can teach you how to see through an Indigenous lens and to start to understand that. Okay, so that was the heavy stuff. Let's talk about just some practical stuff that I want you to know. So when you go out into the world, you've got a little bit of information. I am teaching this. There's people that are in charge of engagement that will buy me a cup of coffee so I can tell them this stuff. Because we don't know. So when we talk about Indigenous health here in Manitoba, we have to think about distinctions-based considerations. So that means, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, because there's different legislation that affects all of us differently. So pan-Indigenous kind of umbrella is not going to work in this province when we're talking about health and health systems planning. And why? Because First Nations fall under the Indian Act. The Inuit folks fall under the Indian Act, but that wasn't until, did anyone know when that happened? Because the Indian Act is from when? 1876. So I'll give you the answer. I won't make you guess. But Inuit came under the Indian Act in 1939. So it wasn't like this archaic piece of legislation. And you know why? Because people in Quebec, the Quebec government said they're really expensive up there in the Inuit communities and we don't want to pay for them. And they're dying en masse, and so they slid them under First Nations and Inuit Health Branch. And then most recently we have my nation, the Métis Nation, which just in 2021 declared itself the national government for the Red River Métis. Before that, Manitoba Métis Federation was a non-for-profit organization that did a lot of good work, but was not recognized. And then there's the fourth one. I stole this from Monica Fehr, who's the head of Ab Health and Wellness. Her and I chat about this. And it is our urban Indigenous population. And that's me too. We have unique needs. Our kin lines blend. I've got Anishinaabe friends, and I go sit in their sweat lodge, and I go to drumming group, and I'm learning Cree songs, and I go to Métis, and I'm speaking Michif, and so it's like there's this blend, and we all know each other, and we're all kin, and we all love each other. And so this idea that culture does not continue to evolve past this historical concept of Indigenous people. So these are really kind of the four groups, if you're thinking about doing interjurisdictional collaboration, intersectoral collaboration, that you need to know about and consider when you're doing any type of planning. When we talk about First Nations, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because I'm almost at time. These are all the people that you need to think about. So in Manitoba, you've got the First Nations community health staff, band-funded programs, preventative health care, well baby checks, education. They're doing all that work on the ground. They're funded by Indigenous Services Canada to do that. Some of them choose to consolidate their funding at the tribal council level. So for programs like basic foot care, mental wellness, different communities will do this differently. Different tribal councils hold different portfolios. It's not the same. The tribal councils, their board of directors are usually the chiefs from the First Nations communities that they're serving, sometimes a few ad hoc members. Then you have our regional-led First Nations organizations. So you might know some of these, AMC, FNISM, MKO, KM, SEO. These folks here, different communities hop in and out, and they belong to different ones. And primarily, historically, they were political groups. But now there's money that's kind of come in for service delivery, so they're in with the tribal councils and First Nation community, also supporting service community. They all have a little bit of a different function. So AMC and FNISM are really interested in what? Data sovereignty. Whereas the health director from a First Nations community like Hollow Water might say, okay, we're going to focus this month on doing some education at the school around safer sex practices. Okay? We usually only engage with the political organizations at the level of health, but it's actually a lot of the communities and the tribal councils that are actually doing the work and delivering the care. So don't overlook them. I've been very successful when I brought the Manitoba HIV first national HIV testing day to the province of Manitoba. We had testing in all 64 First Nations communities, and that's because I worked with the tribal councils. They got it done. We have U of M. U of M is not an Indigenous-led organization. Even Ongomasan Health Services is not an Indigenous-led organization. They are run by the University of Manitoba. They are responsible to the board of the University of Manitoba. And so even if they have Indigenous leadership, they're not the same as an Indigenous-led organization. They do not have community accountability. Indigenous Service Canada, formerly FNIB, they do primary care delivery for now. That's going to change. They do public health, contact tracing during COVID, any kind of STVBI, reportable illnesses. They're in charge of that. And why? Because the Indian Act says so. What we're going to see in the coming years is devolution and transfer of health services to First Nations leadership. And that's going to be taken on by primarily the top 3 communities, maybe a little bit of the U of M. And then on top of that in Manitoba, there's some provincially funded nurses stations. And those are the folks where they might not be rural or remote enough for Indigenous Services Canada to take them on, but they think, well, that then the province of Manitoba realized there's no primary care virtually at all for those people that are living there, and so they've funded some of the care. For Inuit folks, there is no Inuit communities, at least, and if I'm misspeaking, I am sorry, I looked this up. So I hate to say there's no Inuit communities in Manitoba. There's Inuit people in Manitoba. There's informal communities, but it's not like James Bay Inuit or Nunavut, where all the kind of land claims and stuff like that go through politically. So some of the Inuit associations in Manitoba, please don't forget about them if you're saying that you're going to do Indigenous engaged research or you're going to do Indigenous collaboration. Please reach out to Manitoba Inuit Association or Kivalliq. And then ISC is responsible similarly for coverage, even if they come through provincial systems, they'd be covered under FNIP. And then my folks, the Métis folks, we're just getting started. We have the MMF, we have a little bit of funding that goes towards dental and prescriptions right now, that's about it. And then the province takes care of the rest. And then our urban Indigenous populations. So think about some of your urban Indigenous-led health services. I apologize. I did this slide deck fairly last minute, so this is very Winnipeg-centric. They're the people I know. I'm sure I'm missing people on here. It's not a slight, it's just to illustrate some of the examples. So we've got Ab Health and Wellness. Some of the First Nations funded primary care clinics, so like Peguis has a clinic here in the city now for some of their band members and some other groups. There's also Indigenous-led community services. So think about your friendship centers, Mamaway Ichita, which also does some child and family services, Kaniganichuk, which also has an STBBI clinic, Thunderbird House, Native Clan for folks exiting the criminal justice system, Indigenous-led organizations for harm reduction, 13 Moons, Two Spirit People of Manitoba, and then there's a various kind of milieu of other groups that have Indigenous wellness programming. So think Clinic with a K, Nine Circles Community Health Center, that are pretty good at allyship, I'd have to say, and serve a lot of Winnipeg's urban Indigenous population. So last little bit, inviting communities to lead. What can I do? This is just some really practical advice for people reaching out, wanting to work with First Nations or Indigenous communities. Be humble, start learning and understanding the impacts of historical and ongoing colonial efforts and how that's led to systemic mistrust. Allow Indigenous partners to lead. Be respectful. Your priorities aren't going to be their priorities. And if you want to be a service leader, you're probably going to need to address their priorities before your own. Be open to learning. Understand that Western medicine is not neutral, it's not unbiased, it has its own philosophy, its own worldview. We've been taught this. Be open to learning. Oh wait, be willing to follow. So Indigenous people are the experts in their own health. Before I stop presenting this last slide, I want to just share with you a little bit about blood memory. Who's heard of this? Epigenetics, who's heard of it? Right, okay, so it's the same thing. And it's something that Indigenous people have known about for a really long time. It's stuff my elders have spoken to me about. And when you start to think about the fact now that there's a study, Dr. Barry LaValle out of Kim is leading it up, and they're looking at diabetes. And they're looking at trauma. And they're looking at the trauma from the impacts of colonization. And what they're actually finding is that as Westerners, we have no idea how to treat chronic disease and manage chronic disease. Because when you're taking a young baby, which actually has had, you're looking at their markers and you're comparing them to a 62-year-old white man that grew up in privilege in Winnipeg, and that baby is more at risk for diabetes based on markers that they're finding in the blood. That's epigenetics, and that has nothing to do with lifestyle or choice. And so we're really just learning right now about Indigenous teachings that have been passed on for a really long time. It's really exciting, actually. And so when we talk about Indigenous people being the experts in their own health, that means if you hear something that might not jive with something that you've been taught previously in school, just hang on. You might have something to learn. And so that will bring us back to the first one, to be humble. And I went over. I said I wasn't going to. But that is me. If you need to get a hold of me, you can share my slides, that's fine. And I thank you for your time today. And if you have questions, I'll take them.
Thank you very much.
Questions?
Any questions from the crowd here?
Don't be shy. It doesn't have to be about this. You can ask me anything. Just kidding.
At the back.
I have a question, Stephanie. So for the nurse practitioner program, we would like to be able to, I'll back up. So I used to work with Northern Medical Unit back when it was J.E. Hildy's and Norway House. And the nurses there that I worked with were amazing. They were from the community. They did everything. And I would say to them, it's like, you know, you should become a nurse practitioner, right? You can provide care. They couldn't keep physicians. They couldn't, and there was lots of worries and hesitancies around that, right? So now, years later, how can we support nurses in those regions, those areas that are providing amazing care, may have the thought, may not have had the thought yet of providing more care through advanced practice, those kinds of things, to reach them?
Well, I mean, I think advocacy is a really strong point. And the other thing is like, we have to change our education system and our policies, right? In terms of scope of practice. I don't know what happened. And this is for all of nursing in Manitoba. Like when the Healthcare Providers Act came in, I was just like gutted. I mean, maybe I speak for a lot of nurses because it really obliterated scope of practice. Indigenous Services Canada, of course, doesn't fall under that, so that's why the practice is able to be such a larger scope in community. But I think about work that's happening in Churchill right now. So Jason Klingshire is the COO up there. He started a healthcare aid course for community members. So to Dooley, York, Lac Rocher, Brochet, brings people up to Churchill, which is actually a lot more culturally sound for people that have families that are like that are used to coming to Churchill. Like there's people that are very transient from community to town and back. And so now they're looking at, you know, how do you build an LPM program? And I'm a big fan of thinking about how do we restructure education to be like a nurse ladder program, right? So it's like, okay, here's what you're doing and what you're able to do. Why aren't we, and don't kill me, why aren't we running this a little bit more like the trades, where it's like people can go out and nurse and then come back and do 6 months of theory and then go back out and be mentored and kind of go back and forth that way while receiving a salary, while being able to be home with their kids. And I think that that would be something really interesting, and I think it involves us restructuring how, you know, how we invite people in by going there and showing a willingness to learn about their community and how that works, as opposed to saying you have to come here and you have to leave everything that you know and love. So that would be a place to start.
Yeah, so like ideally we've been even kind of playing around with ideas like how can we, so that they don't have to leave their communities, right? So that education.
Distance ed and doing that. It's really exciting. There's a lot of possibility right now.
The University of Manitoba, the GNSA, just supported the dual delivery push through the University of Manitoba, so we could be one of the first, I believe, in Faculty of Health Sciences to offer all of our master's, NP, advanced courses by dual delivery.
Great, GNSA, doing some good work.
That's
awesome.
Dr. Martin.
Is she gone? Yeah.
She was here, but yeah, but it's awesome.
Any other questions?
Online? No. They're a quiet bunch online.
They were very quiet, yeah.
Thank you very much for your time, and I hope everyone has a good evening.
Well, thank you everyone for your presentations. We truly appreciate you having here and share your knowledge with us. Thank you to many different people who made this event possible. First of all, to all the APN committee members, Eunice, myself,
Ariel, Ashley, Abby, thank you for helping us all make this possible.
Well, we're going to school and working, so it's been great. Thank you to the GNSA, the College of Nursing. A few final reminders before you leave tonight. One thing is with photographer here, I think I told Cindy that, but I didn't tell. He wants to take a picture of the 3 speakers. Just outside after. Still time to donate to the Manitoba Harm Reduction Network. And lastly, we appreciate your feedback on the APN conference to help us plan for next year. So there's online, the same online, or is it, yeah. So we've gone into the new century. Thank you again. Have a good night. We'll draw for the gift basket.